So I'm going to take a minute and introduce the panel that we're about to talk to. It's pretty wild. I get super excited about the people we're going to hear from because they represent the industry across all of the different verticals that are relevant to how we're driving innovation into the future. So I have notes, so don't judge me. So I'm going to start with Megan Callahan, newly appointed board of director here at Kinetik. Yep, come on up. Now, Megan is currently the COO of Twill and the former head of Lyft Health, but for the last 25 years, have a seat, take a load off. For the last 25 years has been working in some of the largest healthcare organizations in the country, like McKesson and Change Health. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Keith Payet, come on up, Keith. Senior Vice President of Product for UnitedHealthcare Community and State, and most recently was the CEO for UnitedHealthcare in Tennessee and Connecticut. Come on up.
Thank you, Effie.
Next, we have Gordon Wynn, who is the president of Tennessee Carriers, a transportation broker in Tennessee. Come on up. Providing statewide services to two state health plans. Gordon actually started his company in 1994 with one wheelchair van and he drove himself, and now brokers 7,000 trips a day and services millions of lives. Thank you, Gordon. I'll let you guys figure right. Then we have Bill George, a 37-year taxi cab industry veteran and founder of WHC Worldwide, zTrip. zTrip is the largest taxi cab operator in North America and currently operates in 26 cities, and zTrip completes more than 5 million NEMT trips annually. And finally, the man of the hour, Sufyan, CEO of Kinetik, and the reason we're all here today. So come on in. Those who know me know I don't normally have notes, but I didn't want to get people's bios wrong. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off. We have questions, but I told this group, let's just roll with it because, again, you have some of the most seasoned industry folks available on this topic. So, Megan, I'm going to start with you. First of all, congratulations on your recent board appointment.
Thank you so much.
Can you guys hear her? Is her mic on?
No?
Okay, here you go. I'll just pass it to you.
You.
Yeah, so Megan, so you've been championing innovation at the state and national level in your time at Lyft Health. What attracted you to Kinetik, and what do you see in the future?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and Sufyan, thank you for inviting me to join the board. I left Lyft Healthcare about a year.
Is this me?
I don't know.
Sorry.
About a year ago, and Lyft is pretty innovative in the NEMT space. But what was interesting when I first met Sufyan, I spent a long time in my career at McKesson Corporation, where we did a lot of revenue cycle management. And when I started at Lyft, I was really trying to understand how transportation providers did revenue cycle management. And I was making all these calls to industry leaders, and nobody could tell me anything about anything. And then we met Sufyan, and he was this, frenetic, man at a whiteboard mapping out all the intricacies of how it worked because he had been in the bowels of a transportation provider for a year or two doing the hard work to figure out how to automate it. And I left that meeting and I thought that was something, right? Because it's a very niche market, very important market, and no technology provider that I knew had really cracked what he had done on the revenue cycle management side. Then if you go to Lyft, a lot of brokers and a lot of payers wanted to work with Lyft because we had a digitized network, right? So, think of when you get into a Lyft, it is not paper-based. You don't have to write down an odometer reading. You know exactly where you picked up, where you dropped off, et cetera. And people really love that. But Lyft is not, or Uber is not appropriate, right, for many, many rides. We would, I had the privilege of working with Effie when she was at Logistic Care with Gordon at Tennessee Carriers. We'd always get pushed to, well, what are you doing for rural, right? What are you doing for ex-urban areas? And, it's not necessarily cost effective for Lyft to go into those areas. So, that was an issue. And then we're certainly not, Lyft is not appropriate for, acute, you have to be ambulatory. You have to be able to get in and out of the car. And we weren't going to go into these higher orders of care. So as the payers started to put out RFPs, and Keith will probably talk about this, that said mandating digitized networks, right? No longer wanting to have paper-based or non-digitized models, we started talking about what if you could take the Lyft technology, right, and put it in a standard transportation provider. And then we started talking to Sufyan, and he's like, well, I'm doing that, right? I'm doing that. And so when you take what Kinetik offers end to end, right, between the revenue cycle management side and then the trip scheduler and the transparency that creates and the footprint that creates and the data that it creates. And once you start getting that data, I think you have a really interesting flywheel in terms of optimizing networks, making sure that you have redundancy in your networks, which I'm sure you all will talk about. So I think his vision is just really, really compelling and where the industry needs to go. And there's some big players, and it's hard to innovate when you're a really, really big player. So the nimbleness that Kinetik has shown and the vision, I'm just really excited about what they can do for the industry. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'll just say ditto. No, I mean, and everything she's talking about, like I said, but I'm so excited about this panel is everybody has a different perspective on that same thing, because the one thing about, well, healthcare in general, NEMT specifically, it's a very matrix industry. There's no one part of that value chain that's more important than the other. It needs each other to work well, and to have those workflows and that transparency and that data to be able to really drive it forward metaphorically and literally. So Keith, your role at United Health Group, you see the challenges and opportunities as it relates to solving for things at a national level in a highly fragmented and nuanced marketplace. Love to just talk a little bit about how you guys are approaching that as a payer.
Yeah, so I have a mic. I think you could all hear me. I'm going to actually step back from that national perspective, because what's really meaningful is the individuals that we serve in the community, right? And that's where it starts. And I'll give you an example of experience, right? We have individuals 80 years old, post-acute care needs, they need to go to their appointments, right? We're talking about NEMT, but for them, it's critical. It's critical that they get there. It's critical that they get there timely and that they get there when they need to, right? So for us, when we're looking at the system, we have to ensure that there's quality. We have to ensure that there's timeliness and safety as well within this system. So collectively, we have a responsibility to get that individual to their appointment. So we're talking about digitize. When we think about digitizing, this effort, there are challenges there, right? We need to digitize this. We need to have the data. We need to advance NEMT so that way we have visibility to ensure that we have insight into that consumer experience, right? I'm getting forward, but we need to have insight into that consumer experience, right? Did the trip go as planned? Did they get there timely? Did they get picked up? Did they get picked up from the doctor's office? Did they get home? What was that full experience? And I'll tell you, having done this for 20 years, there's numerous stories about, how we failed. I mean, mostly we're successful as an ecosystem of NEMT, providers or purveyors, but, there are failures within the system. And, in terms of what Sufyan's putting together, I had the ability to kind of see some of the technology that he's putting together within Kinetik. It really provides that insight that we need to evolve this system. So very excited to see what he's putting together. It gives us as a managed care organization, there's some components of that out there in the ecosystem today, but really this gives us the information we need to make decisions, right? Decisions on quality, decisions on providers, decisions in terms of how can we improve the member experience, right? So it's really meaningful, and that's the kind of information that we need as a managed care provider.
No, that's really helpful. And I think there's a part of that you said that's important, and I'm going to pass it to Gordon in a second. But the part that I thought was so interesting about Kinetik too is, again, going back to it being a value chain and no one being more important than the other. Everyone needs each other in healthcare, right? It's a weakest link business. One of the things that I was so attracted to is that it's for the transportation providers too. Like, everybody wins. It makes each of the different components more successful at what they're doing and makes it easier and better and faster and cheaper and smarter. And that's the kind of innovation that you need in order to really drive progress in difficult marketplaces. Because to Keith's point around managing and maintaining network in a place where you've got a lot of little tiny pieces in a community, all healthcare is local. And all of those little tiny pieces are very important. And I think probably nobody knows that better than Gordon. being the broker. And he sits in such a unique position as a broker, as someone who has to straddle the needs of all of those different folks, the plan or the state, the transportation providers and the members, so I'd love to talk with you, Gordon, a little bit about what you guys are doing and how you're thinking about all this too.
Thank you so much. My team and I are excited to be here. Effie asked us to write my introduction, so we wrote that, and we put the part in there about my driving a wheelchair van on purpose, because I literally started with one van that I drove myself. And that experience, I've been in homes and changed diapers to help people get to the doctor. I will also tell you there are no men in nursing homes, just so you know, they all die. But I went into a lot of nursing homes, learned that, take better care of myself now. But my point of starting there is having seen this industry evolve and the expectations change in the industry, and the software has not kept up with the change that was needed until this young man and his team came along. His platform allows bringing together of the transportation providers and the broker and all the pieces in a way that's never been done. I liken it to what Tesla has done in the EV space. Everybody's going to build an EV, but Tesla's been doing it 10 years. The Kinetik team is that far ahead of the other software companies. And you mentioned the transportation providers. Another great piece of this is we figured out if we can make our TPs better, it makes everything go better. And it's a great tool for us to have another contact point with providers. We worked with them to get PPP loans. We worked with them, excuse me, helping them get better insurance. This is just another way to help make them better. And they make it all work. The efficiencies, just knowing, what I can tell Keith, the capacity of my network. It's a number that doesn't help much at 3 p.m. when you've got a difficult person to move, but with software that can show me a dashboard of what's available. I can call transportation providers and say, hey, have you got a van? But it's clunky. This software will allow us to literally see the whole network live. And one of those changes that changed the expectations in the business was Uber and Lyft coming in. Absolutely. We love working with them and they help us. You're right, can't do everything, but can do a lot. But that technology of having someone look at their phone and see where their van is, we're going to have that. And that doesn't exist. So we're being pushed by technology of others, but in a good way to be better. And I think my last point would be that what the Kinetik team has done is brought together a group of people who recognize NEMT could be better. And we're all on the same page on how to do that. And there's never been a collection of people at every level, TNC's, health plan, the taxi man, who agree on a path to make it better, to literally, I'm not exaggerating, transform NEMT as it's done in this country. And we have the will to do it. And now we have the tools. And I think that's what's exciting about being a part of this.
Yeah, there's just so much I want to react to. There's the real-time aspect of life, right? Healthcare is real-time business, just like it's a weakest link business. Knowing that something went wrong 2 days later doesn't help the person that didn't have the thing 2 days ago. When you think about being able to manage all those little moving pieces and aggregate that up to all the folks that need to know, every layer has to have what they need in order to succeed. And again, I'm going to keep saying it over and over and over again, but there are no unimportant members of any of these communities. Everybody needs each other. Everybody has to work together, and technology is a bridge for that, right? But it has to be a bridge where you pay onus to core competencies and you allow people to have the brain space to do the things that they're really good at. And that's, again, one of the things that attracted me to this. And I think the bill, I can pass it to you now, because as that, largest tech-enabled transportation provider already doing all of this, like, how do you think about that for yourself? And as you grow and kind of iterate in this space now and later?
Sure, it's a huge challenge in our industry, and this is really what the partnership has meant to us. If you look at it from our view, we're a company that grows about 30% a year, and we do a lot of acquisitions, and the NEMT market is a huge piece of that. So when we go into a different market, the fears that we see in the industry are, number one, we're taking people on medical trips, for the most part, have a condition that require special care. And as more players have gotten into it, as the market's expanded, the cost of claims has skyrocketed in our industry. So now you have insurance companies that are coming back saying, well, we're going to rate you differently if you're a taxi provider that's doing an EMT work. It used to be the rate was down, now it's going up. So we have to look at that in the future. How do we control that cost and how do we become more efficient? So we took that challenge, but the challenge that when you try to route to be efficient, the reality is the most brilliant routing programs, your routes are broken by about 9:30 in the morning because there's so many cancellations. We all know doctors are always on time with their appointments, and so they're scheduled to be picked up at 11. So we've developed a system that we've been working on for 3 years that actually routes on the fly. So instead of doing routing overnight, it's batching constantly. And then you put that with the fact that with the cost going up, with the shortage of labor plus the insurance costs, how do we become more efficient for the payer? And we're starting to approach with several of our clients, how do we come in and say, why do your people only need to ride with your members? Why can't we take similarly situated people, expand the universe, and then route these trips better and share costs? Well, all that sounds great, and that's the path we're pursuing, but then we go in and try to build that. Yeah. And that's where the problem comes in. And where Kinetik has been wonderful for us to work with is, some of the providers, you can have anything you want as long as it's chocolate or vanilla. With Kinetik and Mallory, Sufyan, one of our RVPs did a road trip across Colorado to some of our cities, and then the entire time we were riffing about, could we do this? What about this? And the response was, yeah, we can. And so as we work through this and we integrate with all the systems, that really is what makes a difference. And I think that's what's going to change the trajectory of our industry as we compete with NEMT and the providers that we have that understand the vision and say, this is so much bigger than just billing a single. That's how we put all these things together. So we're pleased to be a part of it. I feel very fortunate through my NEMT connection to have met Sufyan. And we're excited to see the energy in this room and everybody online that's participating, working towards this goal.
Again, if you guys haven't noticed, there's a theme with me. I always have something to add. I'm keeping it under control. But I think, is it you? Is it you? It's you. No, but again, I think as you look at, Sufyan, as you've kind of, as Megan said, you starts with the craziness on the whiteboard and kind of looking into the future, having sat in the back office of the transportation company and kind of learned the realities. And it was part of Gordon's story that I love so much, is that a lot of times people who are driving innovation have no context for reality. And they sit up here and they go, it should be better. And they do this and they don't understand how the businesses work, why they work that way and what the realities are. So the solutions aren't scaled. They don't solve the problem. And then it makes people stop believing in innovation. And I think, so Sufyan, as you think about the beginnings of your story and sort of how you went from there to here, like, how do you think about how that influenced sort of what the vision is and where you want to take Kinetik and the industry going forward?
Hey, can you hear me? Oh, no. We're good? Cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Before I answer your question, as a visionary, I'm kidding. Look, there is no Kinetik without all of our employees here. So many of us are dialing in from so many different countries across 3 or 4 countries that we have employees. I'd like to give a huge round of applause for all the employees at Kinetik before I start. Now back to me. This happened naturally. Oftentimes, I think, a lot of times people ask me, okay, how'd you come up with this idea? There are a few reasons why I really like these folks. I stole my idea from them. Every time I'd sit there and they give me more ideas and I'd take it back to the drawing board, go to my investors who'd fund me, and then I'd build a company. But what's phenomenal about this panel is that a week ago, this was supposed to be for 150 people, a shareholder update for our investors. I was in the tube for 8 hours on a plane. I landed and I called, I think it was Effie first, in this order actually. Effie, I was like, hey, I'm just going to change next week's event to a panel discussion. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, let's just put everybody together. And she's like, okay, I'll do it. Then I called Megan, and Megan is like, what are you talking about? Same concept. And Keith is like, sure, I just need permission. I was like, okay. And I called Gordon. Well, I called you. He said no. Then I made Mallory call his wife. And then he said yes. And then Gordon said yes. And so I'm incredibly lucky because of all of you who've helped me over the last 5 years get to the point where Kinetik is today. There's no way we could build this without the input from the industry. So we're very grateful that all these folks came together to say, hey, this is going to be the company that's going to move this industry forward. When we started the company, it was a very novel idea. When I went to the back office of Janelle's office, it was just 12 months of sitting there and trying to figure this thing out. We were trying to build the first revenue cycle management platform for the industry. It just didn't exist. And what we realized is that, okay, we built out the product, we integrated with 3,100 payers, it's first of its kind, and nobody was using it. And then we realized, well, there are all these medical billers that are billing for these folks. Let's integrate. What are they doing? Where are they getting this data? And so every transport company uses dispatch platforms to communicate with the drivers, and the data that's needed to bill the payers, it's stored there. And so we started integrating with our dispatch partners. And so when we integrated with our dispatch partners, we still realized that we weren't able to bring in the requisite data to generate the claims. And that's when you realize how interconnected all of this stuff is, right? So then you take one step forward and you're like, okay, where's this data coming from? Then you're looking at all these different booking platforms. And because of compliancy issues or PHI, HIPAA, et cetera, a lot of folks were not storing patient data that's needed to then generate a claim in the back end. And so we worked our way from the very back offices of transport companies to now one of the largest managed care organizations and health insurance companies in the country. And it took a tremendous amount of patience, tremendous amount of resilience. But every year it was just a new player that said, hey, yeah, we need this and we need that. And I think we reverse engineered the whole thing into building one of the nation's largest transportation networks that's connected by our proprietary products. And also when it comes to product development, what we look at is where in the industry are there mature products? If there are mature products in this particular area, we're not going to build it, we're going to integrate. And I think we could touch base on the importance of interoperability and connecting with others. I think historically in many industries, especially niche marketplaces, folks are reluctant to work with one another. And I think what's really amazing about this panel is that we've all come together and said, hey, let's just work together to move the needle forward.
Well, okay, so we went through our list and we're now off script, so who knows what's going to happen. You brought up some good topics though, and I want to open it up to the group because I think about, what does interoperability mean as it's related to things like NEMT? Because you have to understand, for the folks who don't work in this industry, it's a paper-based industry, very, very local. And when people talk about interoperability sort of at a big strategic level across healthcare, this is not part of the equation, right? But being a person who understands sort of the moving work inside driving outcomes for the humans on the ground, things like transportation are vital to the success of all of those endeavors. And so bringing that into that interoperable ecosystem, so folks like Keith can be able to tell stories across communities, be able to enable Gordon to react in real time, enable, Bill to be able to do the things he was talking about dynamic scheduling and all of these different things. It starts at that very beginning. So, and I was so happy that today we started with the transportation providers, because I'm going to say this over and over again, because you say I repeat myself a lot, but transportation providers and any providers in community are everything, right? And people who sit above them, trying to help them sort of get in line with that strategic initiative at a national level or state level or broker level or whatever it may be, that connection point is the beginning of everything. And being able to help them succeed, when they succeed, everybody succeeds. And so I just want to open it up to the group. We didn't talk about this beforehand. So how do you guys think about the impacts of that interoperability, sort of just in general around not just NEMT, but social determinants of health, and how it's all being looped together through some of these platforms, technologies, and et cetera?
Well, I'll just kick off just generally. I mean, if you think about the legacy players in healthcare, their technology is, very brittle, and everything is kind of connected by duct tape and baling wire. And it might be patched together nicely, but you still don't get the kind of the through line that I think you're going to get, that you do get with, a modern technology platform that does connect all of those disparate stakeholders. And if you think about the kind of scalability that will allow Kinetik, and quite frankly, by my understanding of how the platform is built, the extensibility, even outside of NEMT, right? If you wanted to, I'm not saying you do, but it's an extensible modern platform.
Well, because it's a universal thing, right? So in healthcare, the universal need to be able to see what's going on, to Keith's point about how do I, at a national level or state level or payer level, be able to know what's happening on the ground, to help provide care and to get access to care for members. It's such an important piece of it. And if you can't see what's happening, you're kind of stabbing in the dark around what's going to drive the most value and how you're going to be helpful. So Keith, I'll throw that your way. Turn your mic back on.
It's off the hook, Effie. No, I think you bring up a good point, being able to tell the story. And having been in managed care for 20 plus years, you talked about innovation as well. We're seeing innovation in this space, but it's innovation built off of already a broken baseline technological system, right? So we still didn't get to that base technology and bring it up to parity in terms of where the rest of the industry in managed care or healthcare is going. So that's an interesting value proposition here, is that this innovation now starts, building that capability and allows for us to really get to additional levels of innovation. And then it provides more visibility as well. To Effie's point, in our business, we're always, having to tell the member's perspective, right? We need to talk about providers as well. And for us to be really able to do that, we need to support it with data and information and transparency. And we don't necessarily always have that to tell a comprehensive material type of story as we continue to look at expanding our business. So that's what's really interesting here, is that, all these years of work that you've put together, from my perspective, Keith here, it's really pushing the system to revolutionize the way we look at NEMT, which has been somewhat left behind in terms of innovation. So.
Well, and Mr. Keith Payet is also, we call it NEMT, but with the explosion of Medicare Advantage, D-SNP, the number of rides we provide to non-medical destinations have tripled over the last year. So we're not just trying to fix an industry that's in stasis. I hope I'm not talking out of school, but Keith told me we're thinking about approving for our D-SNP population, transportation to church. Again, social determinants of health, it makes people happy, healthier. I'm all for it, but we're adding new trips and new destinations. The old, our phone would ring, are you in network? Yeah. Well, now we're taking people, and it's great, but it's a new challenge. So again, the software, the platform, we have to adapt again to this new reality of social determinants of health. It's a big thing, but it's never really, no one knew how to do it. Like, we get it, it's important, but how do you do it? And now we're doing it.
Yeah, so it's operationalizing a concept, right? So you now have the ability to take sort of kind of a nebulous concept around the practical realities of, I know if I get a person care, or if I know if someone goes to church, because loneliness is one of the biggest indicators of healthcare costs and death. And that's not to bring the room down, but it it is. And so being able to provide access to things that provide social stimulation, things are legitimately and sort of in a data way showing the value prop and the limitations for payers to be innovative in that space using practicality to their benefit was being able to work with the transportation community and the brokers in a new and different way, and to create not only access, but also create opportunity for supply and demand. And so, like, I don't know, Bill, do you guys do a lot of that type of work, or how are you thinking? I would assume so at your size.
I mean, we do about 28 trips now per year, with 5 million of them being NEMT, but you look at what branches off from that and the other categories. And I think that's why this discussion and these ideas are so important. There was a landmark ruling that really didn't get, I think, the attention that it needed about 3 weeks ago, that a group had sued TNC, saying that they had not done enough for wheelchair transportation. They weren't being accessible. And the judge, to a surprise of us, came back and said it would be a burdensome cost for them to add wheelchair service to their mix, which I would have lost a bet on which way that ruling went. And so you look at it now, especially on the pressure of the wheelchair service. On a taxi cab side, we have a percentage of the fleet that is wheelchair accessible. But more of that burden now will fall on there. And because it's so expensive, both from a vehicle standpoint, from a driver standpoint, from an insurance standpoint, we have to get as efficient as possible and maximize the usage of these vehicles, breaking down as little downtime as we have, cutting out deadhead miles, so we can afford to continue to expand the wheelchair fleet. And I think that will have a huge positive impact if we're able to do so for the industry as a whole and for the people that rely on those services. But unless we can get smart and let technology play the role it has to, there's no way to get there. So that's where this emphasis comes from, and why we search out companies like Kinetik to help us get through whatever we can do to take costs out of the operation and to improve efficiency.
Well, and I think also it's an enabler for the folks in the space who are trying to design benefit structures and stuff to be able to do it with confidence that it will be reliably administered. Because again, to have an idea of saying, this is a very practical thing, you've got to be able to actually do it on the ground. And so understanding those foundations and connections is paramount to being able to have confidence and kind of positioning those kinds of benefit opportunities as a health plan or state or anyone else who might be working in that. So, do you want to add anything about I mean, we talked about a lot, so.
Yeah, no, I think for us, the recurring thing, we have so many different stakeholders here, and I think it's imperative every stakeholder focuses on their core competency. We shouldn't conflate that, right? So if you are an MCO, focus on managing those lives. If you're a broker, manage grievances in the trips and those lives too, right? Bill George is not just a taxi man. Bill George's operation spans 16 states. One of the most talented business folks I've ever met in my life. And, for him, when we talked and we clicked right away, and he said, "Why do I have 22 people doing billing here?" And I'm like, "I know, Bill, I'm here." And we did the same thing at Lyft. And on and on. And I think for us, it's so important we stay focused, hyper-focused on what we're good at. And then anything that's not part of our core competency, we should find partners that it's their core competency and let them do it. And growth through partnership is the new model. And we must leverage that to improve access to care. And I hope that trend continues, right? I think for us, one thing to clarify to the industry, it's that Kinetik is not a broker. Kinetik will never be a broker, because if we were, Gordon would not be sitting here. So for me, it's to make sure that folks understand, as a pure technology company, our job is to enable you to do what you need to do. And our job is to put every bit of resource into the tech to make it the best in the country.
Well, I think there's enough nuance in healthcare for everyone, right?
Exactly.
And again, I think people have, to your point, like tried to be everything to everyone and then done some parts of it really well and not other parts. So does anybody have any other final comments on what Sufyan kind of brought up around thinking about that core competency aspect of things? And
Well,
how,
if I can just add something, and it's a profound story. When you and I were having dinner, Keith, we spoke about it, and you realized that if we could stay focused on our core competency, we'll literally save lives. There's this profound story you shared with me, and I don't know if you could share it.
So many stories. No, I just shared with him that, there was a particular individual, that had critical needs, cardiac, cancer, and they needed a specialist, right? And we forget about sometimes in this equation that, you can't just get an appointment for tomorrow, right? Sometimes you have to wait 3-6 months at a time to see a specialist. And that's how critical it is for that individual to be able to get their transportation needs met timely, right? And get to that appointment as well, and get home also. It's really, really critical in this ecosystem that we continue to think about the person. Because if they're late, can't be seen, miss their appointment, or, that could be really detrimental to them. We know what that an equation can be for them, so we have to always remember that this ecosystem impacts one person, and it could be your parent, your brother, sister, your neighbors, and that's how I view things when we get into conversations. It's about that person. We can't forget about that person, and just how important it is for us collectively as a system support them when they need it. And so when Sufyan asked me to kind of join this group, it's a privilege to have the least amount of knowledge on this stage. Just the mission in terms of what it is that we're collectively trying to accomplish here is critical, because it's about that person.
again, I have so much to say, but I'll save you all from my comments. Did we have anything else we wanted to surface today? But I feel like we've really touched on so many things, and Megan has questions.
I have a question for Sufyan.
Talk to me, Megan.
In 5 years, like what do you see? I mean, you talk to all different stakeholders, obviously have really deep relationships. You kind of have what's your crystal ball in terms of 5 years, either for the industry or for Kinetik?
I'll be on an island. Just kidding. I'll still be here. So in 5 years, this is what's going to happen. I think one of the challenges we solve for is rebuilding this infrastructure, right? One of the things we talk about all the time, it's how do you reimagine this industry? Pretend like this industry as it functions today does not exist. And let's go back to the whiteboard and draw it up. And I think in 5 years, the infrastructure is going to be there. And I think any patient anywhere can request a ride. They'll be able to see how many rides they're eligible for. Irrespective of the level of service, they'll be able to get it, whether it's a wheelchair ride or whether it's a stretcher, et cetera. And when that ride is completed, it's going to charge their insurance in real time as opposed to their credit card or what have you. And that's the future that's going to come about. And then it's going to become patient-centric. So it's not just transportation to and from your medical appointment. It's going to be RX delivery. Prescriptions are going to go to you. It's going to be DME, remote patient monitoring systems going to you so that more and more doctors could have, incorporate telehealth into their practices. So that's going to be the future. It's going to be patient-centric. Patients are going to be able to go and, go to their doctor's appointment. But most importantly, this whole transition where, hospitals without border, where your house becomes the hospital. This is, an infrastructure like that is going to usher in that reality.
That's a great place to stop. So I just want to say thank you to everybody and thank you to Sufyan for inviting us all here and for everybody's thoughts and comments. If anybody has any questions for those on the webinar, we're going to send out an email with contact information. You can reach out if you have any questions about anything we discussed today or any ways that you'd like to learn more about what Kinetik is doing. For those in the room, we will be wandering around. So ask any questions you have, and we look forward to speaking to everybody. Thank you.